Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Oh jeez. This one might be a late one. Hell, what else is there more to say about this game? I think everyone shat on this game so much that God himself can see the mound. What more can one person say? I'm going to attempt to try and do this while also giving you my insight as to why this game was a colossal failure from the word go. I think I have unique perspective on the matter, having played fighting games all my life and having sunk 1,000 games on vanilla Marvel 3 alone and even more on Ultimate. From the start of this game's announcement, there was hype, there was joy, there was adulation. It had taken over 10 years from Marvel 2 to Marvel 3, and the dreams and hopes of many fans like myself were dashed when news of development ceasing on Marvel 3 stopped relatively soon in its lifespan. No updates, no balance patches, no new characters outside of Ultimate Marvel 3, nothing of the sort to really keep the game alive outside of its hardcore fanbase and players, and trust me, they tried, with rumors rampant about several things. When news of Infinite broke, the internet blew up at what was another Marvel game that was being worked on in secret. No longer did we have to wait another 10 years for another Marvel game, we were getting one, and getting one fast. There was rampant rumors about the game even before its announcement, however, stating things like button schemes being different with down-down motions replacing the standard Shoryuken motions, which at the time just didn't even seem plausible, with sources close to the game outright saying it was laughable and not true, and more rumors that the game was going to be a heavily MCU-influenced game. At the time, it just didn't seem like any of this was possible. It sounded like a complete misfire, to be honest, alienating veterans of the game and fans of the series who were looking forward to their favorite comic book characters, only to be met with the potential news that if your character isn't in an upcoming film or crossover, it wasn't happening. Still, people remained optimistic. It's Marvel, baby! And the producers of the game were going out of their way to tell people that the legacy of the Versus franchise was going to be preserved. It's gonna be really hard to fuck this up. And then the first gameplay trailer happened. In the defense of Marvel here, this was very early footage, and for the most part, games in early development looked kind of rough, but this was bad. This was all kinds of bad. From a presentation standpoint, the game looked like plastic. Captain America in particular looks like he came straight out of a Hasbro assembly line. It's almost comical how much he looks like the much made fun of Rob Liefeld depiction of himself, with disproportionate arms and chest and no neck, but still, most people focused on Chun-Li. And well, that doesn't really need any explanation now, does it? She's one of your more iconic Street Fighter characters, and they made her look like she lost a fight with a stop sign. They did fix her eventually, but just, what the hell, it didn't have to happen. But again, this was mostly early stuff. They'll fix it later, right? They fixed Chun-Li. That was the hope. Then more characters started being shown off, and just... oh man. You could tell that this was the art style they had settled on. There was no changing it, there was no overhauling it, there was no going back. It was what was going to stick, a very bleak and muted art style that was supposed to be more realistic, and yet managed to suck all the color and fun away from the backgrounds and the characters, giving you this feeling of everything looking washed out. If that's your idea of realistic, you can take it and shove it, because Ultimate Marvel 3 looked 20 times more stylish and fun, and in fact more realistic in comparison to this lifeless art style. At least characters in that game blinked. Every character in the game looks like a lifeless stuffed corpse, and the closer we got to release date, the more lifeless my hype became with this game. It doesn't help that its presentation is essentially a start screen and go. There's no pizzazz, there's no flair, hell there's not even a reference to a comic book. It's about as generic can get, and even the character select screen is lifeless and hollow. How can this game manage to excite anyone when it can't even maintain the eyeballs of the individuals it's intended for? You want to look away from this dumpster fire, not look at it. Its user interface is trash and looks like it came straight out of a mobile game and you have to tap the screen to win. Half the assets on the Marvel side look like they've been ripped off from Marvel Contest of Champions. This entire game from a presentation standpoint is a fucking awful, abysmal mess. And everyone associated with this portion of the game should be ashamed. There's no reason why this game had to look the way it did in 2017. It looked like a game that was made in 2005. And if you're one of those people who says, who cares, it's a fighting game, graphics go out the window when you're playing, you are horribly misguided and naive in your argument. The objective is to entice new players and old alike with cool characters and cool looking moves. But when your budget is akin to a can of tuna fish found in a sewage dump, you have things like Ghost Rider's Level 3 Hyper Combo, which is so ungodly awful and lame that they couldn't even be bothered to make it half as good as it was in the last game, and it's the same fucking move. And that's another issue with the game. Not only is the roster essentially a carbon copy of the last game, minus all the actual cool and interesting characters from a gameplay perspective, but for the most part, many of the animations were also carried over, but with less effort put into them to make them look cool or quite frankly good. It screams laziness. Then there was the story demo, which just... wow. Okay, let's be honest here, okay? No one ever really plays Marvel vs. Capcom for its story. Maybe a small percentage of you do, but the majority of us really don't care for it. It would be cool if it had a proper one with care and attention going into it, but with Capcom, it ain't happening. They're too used to releasing games half-assed, and Marvel writers today are all hacks. Even if they do want to associate themselves with this game, they haven't wrote a compelling story all year, so I don't expect them to really give this game anything great. Arcade mode is there, and character endings are cool. They've always been cool. It's one of the more fun things about every Marvel game to see what the ending for each character is. Marvel 3 was a massive letdown when it came to this. A low-rent effort with 2 slides per character with hardly any creativity put into them, especially with how much effort went into the trailers for the game. This game did away with character-specific endings, however, in favor for a fully fledged story mode. When they announced the story mode for this game, I got worried really fast. Capcom hasn't exactly had the best record when it comes to story mode in any of their games, let alone a fighter, and coming off of that awfulness that was Street Fighter V's story, I wasn't exactly expecting to have my world set on fire. But again, I remained optimistic because it couldn't get any worse, right? In fact, in a Rolling Stone interview with producers on both sides, they stated that the story mode was a joint effort with Marvel overseeing and revising many of the plot points and character interactions to make sure that their characters were being represented and used in the right way. Unfortunately, this also extended to the music, but we'll touch on that in a little bit later. Do you see a pattern here with these producers? I do. Having played this game and its story mode completely, it is very clear that no one gives a flying fuck about the comics or the rich lore that the characters on either side have, because it's all too apparent that the dickhead who wrote this game and wrote the character interactions really only watched a handful of Marvel Cinematic Universe films, including Captain America Civil War and Avengers films, and subsequently made all character interactions based off of the dialogue used in those films. Downright to the fucking scene in Age of Ultron where Tony has a vision of future events happening. Why? Thanos is another one who literally comes in and says, "Fine, I'll do it myself." A fucking after-credits scene line is an intro to a fight. Are they that creatively bankrupt that they couldn't think of anything else to say? Why not do what Injustice does, and have the characters play off of each other using the lore of their histories to back up their pre-fight verbal smackdowns? Instead, we only have about a handful of those. Why have fucking Iron Man call Spidey Underoos in his tag-in? Underoos! All the introductions are forced and contrived. None of them are cute or funny, they're just lazy and boring. The entire story from start to finish is cringe, with only one standout moment with Hulk and Ryu. Outside of that, it looks like a horrible episode of Power Rangers.
Alright then, it's morphin' time! Dragon Sword! Mastodon!
Pterodactyl!
Triceratops!
Saber-tooth tiger!
Tyrannosaurus!
Yeah!
The mocap is over the top bad, and to add more insult to injury, there are 3 specific characters in particular that were included in the game's story mode, but somehow strangely omitted from the main game's initial roster launch. Those 3 were Black Panther, Monster Hunter, and Sigma. That is absolutely horse shit to the highest degree. Not only does that prove that Capcom has this mindset of pay for the cool characters after you buy the same old ones for full retail price, but it also confirms that they don't fucking learn from the backlash they received years ago with Street Fighter Cross Tekken. They intentionally block characters that are already on the disc behind a DLC paywall. Their assets are done. They have fully functional character models. Is there any real reason behind their exclusion other than to capitalize on this predatory DLC tactic that has caused many a backlash and quite frankly killed Street Fighter Cross Tekken? What makes it even worse is that one of the characters is half the fucking main villain of the story mode. I just can't comprehend who in their right mind would think this would be a good idea. I just can't, even from a business perspective. They didn't even try to muster up goodwill with the fans, did they? And it also doesn't help that the performances given to us by the actors portraying these characters is fucking dreadful. Half of them sound like they don't even want to be there. Like they blew their whole budget on that terrible Robert Downey Jr. impersonator and paid the rest of the actors in pennies. They sound like muted versions of themselves when in comparison to the last game. And speaking of sound, what in the flying fuck is this game's soundtrack? When the producers were talking about preserving the game's legacy, did they mean trashing it entirely? Gone are the iconic character themes from the Marvel heroes and villains, and now they've been replaced with generic cookie-cutter heroic themes that try to sound cinematic, but end up becoming white noise. They're all indistinguishable from one another. They don't get me excited to see my character in. They don't set a mood. They make me want to take a nap. What the fuck happened here? Who was this game made for? Kevin Feige? And the biggest insult to fans of the franchise is that the two most iconic character themes in the game at the moment, via Captain America and Spider-Man, are actually in the game. They're just in the fucking credits after you slog through the awful story mode. Holy shit! At least there's some semblance of it being a Marvel game, and despite being the weakest versions of both characters' themes, I take it over whatever the fuck they bought off of generic Heroes Music's R Us and put in the game. And there's no way anyone can cover this game without mentioning the lack of any X-Men or Fantastic Four representation. This is a fucking tragedy, okay, that just did not need to happen. And I wish someone at Capcom had the balls to rake over Marvel and tell them that the X-Men are absolutely vital to the Versus franchise, like Seth Killian did to get Sentinel and Shuma-Gorath in Marvel 3. Look it up. That happened. They're the fucking reason it started in the first place, alongside Akuma, who's also noticeably absent. Instead, what we get is a very safe roster of mostly Avengers-related characters and their subsidiaries, as if not to drive the point home that this game is nothing more than a fucking shilling of movie projects. And the worst part about it all is that instead of including more interesting Avengers heroes, they opt to put in some of the worst, okay? Hawkeye does not need to be here. There's no reason there should have been a Hawkeye return. Scarlet Witch would have been an infinitely better choice, pardon the pun, especially given the fact that the female representation in this game is lacking. Rocket Raccoon could have easily been Star-Lord, or even Loki, considering that the fact that the majority of villains in this game are on an endangered species list, considering how few there actually are. I also find it funny that the developers of this game stated that they chose who got into the film roster-wise via two determining factors, one of which is the obvious, Marvel films tie-ins. The other is gameplay diversity, yet it seems like half the roster is armed with guns and swords. Real fucking diverse. Characters like Super Skrull, or Amaterasu, or even Phoenix Wright are characters with extremely unique playstyles that could have spiced up the very boring roster that we launched with. But instead we just have to have Nemesis, or Firebrand, or Spencer, or Chris even. I think the overwhelming majority of us would have been happier to see other deserving Capcom and Marvel characters get these spots, like Jean from God Hand, Captain Commando, Asura from Asura's Wrath, Leon Kennedy replacing Chris, who has had his day in the sun for far too damn long. Hell, even bringing back Wesker, I think would have been a far more suitable choice. Not to mention that the game launched with less characters than Ultimate Marvel 3 did. Up until now, I haven't even mentioned gameplay, and that's because out of everything about this game, it's the only positive, and even then, it's not exactly great. It's a fighting game. Capcom has been producing and making these since the start. For it to be anything other than decent is a little shocking. And when I see people vigorously defend this game, it always comes back to the same argument. Well, at least the gameplay is solid. And again, I find that argument to be lackluster and naive. If you cannot make the core element of your fighting game work or be good, you should not be making fighting games. Point blank. You have to take a look at the game as an overall package and make it all good, not just the part that you'll be doing the most. Equal amounts of effort for everything within the confines of the game. That being said, Marvel Infinite is by far the most boring and stale fighter in the Versus franchise history. I find it funny how in retrospect you had so many competitive players coming out and boasting about what in their words were the endless amounts of creativity the new system allowed you to have, and that the gems were game changers. Yet all of them resorted to using Dante, Gamora, and Ultron and the Reality Stone, because the rest of the characters could not compete. And when they could, it was due to things in the game that were exploited like back-turn unblockables. Real creativity were things like Marlin Pie Doom air combos, which were insane to watch and see. You don't get that in Marvel Infinite because there's no function in the game like Doom to do it, first of all, and secondly, the mechanics in the game won't allow you to do it anyway. Combos, for the most part, are meant to be kept short because one-hit deaths are not fun, and that I can understand, but it also costs you the stylistic long combos that Marvel has always been known for. If you hit someone over 15 to 20 times with a specific hit, usually a light punch or light kick of sort, the game will automatically flip the opposing side's character out of the combo, essentially dropping it and giving you a safe neutral getup. While in concept this is a good thing, giving the other side a fighting chance, you also kill any excitement that comes with the creativity of the players extending their combos now that the assist mechanic is gone in favor of the instant tag mechanic. This concept changed the entire game, because you can't really do delayed hyper combos anymore, and tagging in no longer needs to be in a neutral state. A lot of Marvel vs. Capcom staples changed or went out the door with this inclusion of the instant tag, and while at first it was an exciting concept, it quickly became an annoying one, and one that, quite frankly, I don't even think the devs saw all the way through, causing more problems than it does excitement. Just take a look at what happens here when I call Spider-Man.
Let's go, let's go! Red! Wheel selector!
How is this an oversight? It's one of the most brain-dead and basic things to test when it comes to this. It's collision detection 101. While I do think there are some things that are useful, like the tag counter, which costs you 2 meters and has the character who's on the receiving end of a bad beatdown swap out, the mechanic itself is just a haphazardly attempted mechanic thrown in there to give this sense of craziness that Marvel has always been known for. The result, however, is anything but. It's only made matches more boring, with things like push blocking, which really doesn't do much in the game to begin with, useless. It's made punishing your opponent a thing that you now have to second guess, because the moment you attempt to, your opponent will swap out and now punish your punish via a tag. There's a lot more stalemating in this game that hasn't really existed in past Marvel games, and if that tickles your fancy, so be it, but for me personally, I'm not a fan. I am also not a fan of the game's attempt to make itself more accessible to newcomers. I don't mind auto combos. I don't mind them being in the game. But I do mind one frame easy hypers that seemingly come out of nowhere and that are difficult to block, and that are mostly used by people who know how to play the game for a competitive advantage, not for the casual player. And I especially mind having been accustomed to doing combos with characters and now having their inputs drastically changed. The much rumored about down-down motions that people initially went in an uproar about and then went deafeningly silent for upon the game's release was in fact a real thing. For a Spider-Man player like myself, no longer is a standard uppercut motion going to net you Spider Sting, it's now a down-down motion, which is annoying for so many reasons. I've been playing these games for years. For years, the buttons have stayed the same. I didn't even like it when Marvel 3 changed web swing to a backwards Shoryuken motion, but I sufficed that with the buttons being the way that they were, it had to be done. And truth be told, it wasn't that hard to get used to. This is radically different for many reasons. Number one is just an unnatural command to do after 20 years of doing SRKs in all Capcom fighters. Number two is that you completely killed Spider-Man's wave dashing ability, and anyone else who now has a down-down motion replacing their SRK motions. You can't get to the other side of the screen nearly as fast anymore because you've handicapped the character and have him bound behind this awkward command, and the only reason you've done it is to make it easier for the casual player. It's good to have casual in mind, don't get me wrong, but you've again alienated the veterans of the game and have put them in an awkward position. Why not, instead of doing the smart thing and making two control schemes like they used to for past games and having the normal motions that most people are used to and leaving the easy move for the casuals, did they go the route of making it unchangeable to everyone? What were they thinking? I'll tell you what they were thinking. They weren't. This game appeals to no one. It's a mess in every sense of the word. From its mechanics to its roster to its writing to its presentation, this game appeals to no one in an effort to appeal to everyone. This game might have been about the Infinity Stones, but just like the upcoming Avengers film, no one knows where the hell the Soul Stone is, but it's definitely not here. The game lacks soul, it lacks passion, it lacks what used to make Marvel, Marvel. It is no longer about it being a celebration of characters and franchises coming together, and it is about marketing and dollars and exploiting the popularity of a cinematic universe to appeal to the broader audience while making the entire thing look as unappealing as possible and cannibalizing your already pre-established fan base by not listening to them. It's a sellout cash grab that had no business shipping out the way it did and disrespects its own fan base from the creators down to the fans. Oh, and before I forget, there is an online mode. The online mode is barren. It actually took me a second to realize that it was even in the game's main menu under the battle icon, because in almost any other game, online is its own separate thing, not hidden behind a battle icon. A ranked mode, a casual mode, with a beginner's league thrown in there as well. It's your standard fare of online fighter stuff, but it's also boring. At least we get spectator mode in this game, unlike Marvel 3 Vanilla, and more than 2 people can fight in any given time, but again, it's just boring. There's a real missed opportunity here to have 2 people go up against 2 people with 1 person controlling a character on each side. But fun isn't exactly a word that you would use to describe this game, so I'm sure the devs didn't even bother thinking about that. You'll spend more time trying to find matches than actually playing them because no one really plays the game anymore. And even if you do somehow manage to play the game, the lag can be downright awful sometimes. Thankfully, the majority of time I spent with this has been okay. It's remained fairly consistent. But lately I've been experiencing more and more of these random lag spikes where combos that would work no longer work and opponents just suddenly hitting me when they were in block strings. It's safe to say that online is just there, it's nothing to write home about, which is a shame because it seems to be one of the better Capcom networks in terms of online services. The lag is really minimal, but when it's there, it's just as bad as it's always been. You want to know the real reason why I think this game failed? It isn't just everything I mentioned before. I mean, it's a very big reason, but it's not just that. It's primarily the fact that this was Capcom's first fighter after that debacle that was Street Fighter V's initial launch. People wanted effort. People shat on that game for being an empty, hollow vessel of a game that had no business costing $60 at launch with very bare-bones content and missing the series favorites like a Sagat or a Guile, for example. And it had predatory DLC practices that were announced ahead of launch, full well knowing that the game did not meet the standards that most of the players were expecting. This was the plan, to give you as little as possible to charge you more for what's already there or should already be there. People were infuriated. And with this resulted to poor word of mouth, which in turn resulted to poor sales. Does this sound familiar to you yet? Exactly, the same exact story that happened with Marvel Infinite. Except even worse because the people working on this game were in-house at Capcom. It wasn't outsourced like the other games have been. People were hoping and praying that Capcom had learned from this and wishing that going forward it wouldn't happen again, as far as the own CEO of the company saying that they wished for more completeness in their games. But here we are again, telling the same old tale with the same old ending. Except this time, esports will not bail out Marvel vs. Capcom. There will not be any ESPN coverage because no one wants to play this. It didn't even make EVO. It's no longer a must-play game like its predecessors. Hell, it's not even a must-watch game. It's been eclipsed by other games that have put forth more effort and passion and has been left in the dust to be the failure that it deserves to be. Rest in peace, Marvel Infinite. You did it to yourselves. Don't buy the game, hell, don't even rent it. Be very cautious of what you're getting yourself into if you so much choose to dip a finger into this game. I got the deluxe version for $30 off of eBay, and I still don't even feel justified in my purchase. I'm glad I have it to finish my collection, but not much else. For those of you who bought the collector's edition, I am so sorry for you. Just like everything else about this game, you were promised one thing and fed another. You were duped and deceived by hype. And that's all this game is, and it's all it ever will be. White noise fading into obscurity. Hype surrounded with no substance. Tainting the Versus franchise forever. Many people called Marvel vs. Street Fighter the black sheep of the series. Well, not anymore. Marvel Infinite will forever take its mantle as the black sheep for being abysmally mediocre and painfully dull, and lacking any fourth of effort. It really just seems like neither side really cared, with Capcom putting no effort and Marvel handcuffing Capcom at every turn. And the end result was, well, we got screwed. Maybe next time, guys. If there even is one. Hey there everyone, if you've managed to stay this far throughout the entirety of my video, I appreciate it. I honestly wouldn't think that I kept you here this long, but you're here now, so I have a few things that I actually wanted to discuss about this game in particular, because I know that it's going to be very divisive, and I know people are going to come into this either defending it or hating it and bashing it, so I just ask the two sides to please coincide with one another. You can be civil in your discussions about what you don't like and what you do like about this game, and that's all I ask. Civility. Don't be an asshole. Don't bash your opinion into someone else's head just because you have a certain way you feel about this game. I don't really particularly care for this game all that much, but some other people do, and if you do, more power to you. I totally respect and understand your opinion. My opinion is my opinion, and I'm going to stand by what I believe in. If you don't agree with that, then that's fine, but just see your way out. Don't be an asshole. Don't be a dick and start leaving toxic comments just because it makes you feel better defending a game. Come on. Other than that, I have a few other things that I wanted to touch upon. Now, some of you may or may not depending on if you're using ad blocker, have noticed that I'm running ads on my channel now. And I'm doing this, I've started doing this actually at the beginning of the year because it's a nice little backup. It's a nice little side hustle, I guess is the right way to put it. I've been gaining a lot of views and a lot of traction on this channel for the longest time, but I really haven't been capitalizing on it per se. I tried to do a Patreon thing and that failed massively, so I'm not going to do that again. But I would greatly appreciate it if you guys were to disable your ad blocker if you're watching my content. Reason being is because this is a good way for you guys to really directly help me out without actually physically contributing to anything. It's a good 15 seconds that you can probably skip in 5. And to be honest with you, the only reason I was able to get this video out relatively fast, I mean, I started working on it about, like, what, a week and a half ago, is because I recently got hurt at work. And right now, work is trying to dispute my workers' comp. And at any point in time, with the various medical testings that I've been going through, all these bills can end up on my lap. And so, that being said, I could be potentially screwed and out of a home if things go south. So, this is why I'm letting you guys know now that if you support me, if you enjoy my content, like my videos, and you want to see more, help me out. Help me help you, okay? Disable your ad blocker. It's literally 15 seconds that you can skip in 5. I try not to be too egregious with them with their placements. I usually do it at the beginning, at the end of my videos. You guys, don't miss anything, okay? That's all I really had to say. I hope that this works out. Look forward to Spider-Man 3 relatively soon. Working on that too. Alright guys, have yourselves a good night. Don't be dicks in the comments, and take care.